Today's presenter is Judy Ryan. Judy Ryan has been CEO of Lifework Systems, an award-winning company specializing in performance management and workplace culture since 2002. Executive leaders hire Lifework Systems because they want the advantages of a healthy workplace culture. They know that conscientious employees improve business and better serve customers. Judy is an author, columnist, consultant, trainer, coach, and keynote presenter with guest appearances on TV, podcasts, and radio. The mission of Lifework Systems is to create a world in which all people love their lives. Take it away, Judy.
Thank you, Tracy. I love partnering with you, and I really couldn't do this without you, so thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to have you on here. Redirecting negative behavior is one of our most popular topics because everybody's got at least somebody that's driving them a little crazy. So the real key to redirecting negative behavior is in that sentence, how do we strengthen maturity? How do we strengthen right behavior and do it harmlessly? One of the things I wanted you to see on this front screen is that whatever you learn in this program, you can apply it at work, but you can also apply it at home. You can apply it in your church, in your neighborhood, in your school. And that's a great thing about really strong human behavior. So my mission is that you love your life. And I know that you'll love your life more if you can gracefully move through and resolve negative behavior with people. What will you learn in this webinar? So just so you know, this webinar is a subset of a 5-hour program, but it will be its own complete part. And there are handouts and things that you can ask for at the end if you want them that will help you reflect on everything that's in this webinar. So the first thing that you're going to learn about is why we can't afford misbehavior. And then what are the core causes of misbehavior? Because we think we know what those are, but we don't necessarily always examine them. What is the definition of misbehavior, and what are some types of misbehavior, some of which we may not be aware of? What are some helpful and non-helpful responses that we give to misbehavior, and what is redirect itself, and what is a specific redirect process for one type of misbehavior? And then we'll wrap it up with takeaways and ways to apply what I'm talking about in here. And hopefully we're going to have time for you all to ask some questions at the end. So the first thing, why we can't afford misbehavior. Well, part of the reason we can't afford it is because things are changing very rapidly. And we have a lot of goals. We have a lot of things we want to accomplish, and we have a lot of challenges. So some of those challenges and goals are around complexity and how to manage things through these big, massive changes in software development, in digital transformation, in artificial intelligence. Also, the diversity of our world is more obvious to us now through technology, and we're also more aware of where we have barriers. I get asked to speak frequently on the barrier of millennial employees, for example, but we have barriers of all types, diversity of religion, race, etc. Another goal and challenge is just people themselves. How do we attract good people into our lives, into our workplaces? How do we develop them? How do we engage and retain them so that they are the talent that they are? We tend to think of them as this finite pool of people that are talented, and in all reality, if we knew how to develop people well, they would be that top talent. We also have a need to stay innovative, to stay relevant and ahead. Out of the Fortune 500 companies that were started in 1955, only 26 of those still exist today. So it's a real concern, especially as things are changing so quickly. And of course, today we're going to talk all about poor behavior and what some of those costs are. But also, what do all of these challenges and goals cost us in terms of stress and wellness and health costs and absenteeism and those kinds of things? So those are some of the reasons we can't afford not to look at misbehavior. So this is a place where I'm just going to go a little bit deeper, and it's in that area of what does it cost us when we don't address our people and their engagement levels. So there's an organization, Gallup, out there that does surveys every year, and they survey 700,000 American workers. And they're from all different industries. And what they found is that out of every 100, 16 of them are truly misbehaving. They're called actively disengaged. These are the people that would show up to work drunk. They would show up high. They would come in late frequently. They would grossly underperform. They would gossip. They're coercive. They're doing harassment. All of those kind of ugly behaviors that we think of when we think of negative behavior are absolutely in this group. And they found that they cost about $16,000 per person per year, every year. So that cost is over $250,000 for every 100. This group I would consider to also be in a misbehaving kind of place, but it's more subtle, it's more passive. These are the people that they come to work for their paycheck. They're called 9-to-5ers, and more than 50% of the workforce is found to be in this category where they're doing what I call C- work. They're not bringing that A game. And while Gallup says this doesn't cost us anything per person, it doesn't gain us anything per person. And I challenge that. I think if I had a team of people and I had more than half of them being mediocre, I would imagine there's a lot of hidden costs in that, including innovation, good mood, referrals, all kinds of things. So those two numbers combined are 71%. Luckily, we have out of every 100, about 29 people who bring their A game. I would say you guys are in that category. You wouldn't be taking time to develop yourself or your relationships if you weren't in this category. These are the people that are good team players. They're enthusiastic. They take good care of themselves. But this kind of person is gaining an organization $32,000 per year per person. That's close to $1 million for every 100. So here's the rub, you guys. When it comes to negative behavior, the actively disengaged people don't leave, and their behavior is highly contagious. The fully engaged people know their value, know their worth, they're excited about their work, and they'll move on to another location if they can't find a really high-functioning culture or environment. So really what you're putting at risk is that loss of the fully engaged people and then the cost of the actively disengaged people, which is over $1 million for every 100. So just kind of do the math thinking of your own organization. And I bet people are popping in your head in all of these categories. So what do you think about? What do you say about or to? And what do you do when people annoy and irritate you? And I'll go ahead and list 5 of these here. When they anger you and provoke you, when they shock and hurt you, when they act in ways that make you feel worried or pity or despair for them, or when you're around people that they leave you feeling inadequate, judged, and a little less confident. This is that when we typically feel these emotions, our reaction is a similarly negative reaction. So what are the core causes of misbehavior? This picture is one that some of my own team has said to me at times, could we just not use that picture? It's so bleak. And I said, no, I want to use this picture because there's a lot of people that have a smile on their face and they have that mask on when deep down inside, they're often in a state of feeling inferior. And so I wanted you to know that the psychology that we're going to be talking about throughout this webinar, and that is part of the company work that I do, is based on the work of Alfred Adler. And he was the guy who actually coined the phrase inferiority complex. And what he said is that if you don't create a certain type of conditions and conversations, people will go into this complex where they feel worthless and inferior, and that causes them to go into a spiral of uninterrupted struggles, and those struggles are both internal and external. So those internal struggles are some of these things that you can see over here. And if you look at the news, you see that we have, high levels of healthcare costs, and we have addiction, an opioid crisis, and we have too many kids on medication and all kinds of things. And external struggles are the struggles that you see in just about every area of our communities. You see it between religions and politics and in families. And it's all of this, I'm righteous, I'm right, you're wrong, I win, you lose. All of the sexism, genderism, racism are all coming from this state called inferiority complex. And we're so in it, we don't really recognize the cost of it or how to get out of it, or that we even should get out of it. So I wanted it to be kind of uncovered here. So here's a really important thing to know about misbehaving people. A misbehaving person is always a discouraged person. Now, I put these pictures on here because these pictures don't look like people that are really discouraged. They just look arrogant or lazy or self-centered or bratty or whatever. Maybe the guy in jail looks a little discouraged. But I just want you to take my word for it so that you can consider closing your mind to trying to build on focusing on their weaknesses, and instead build on the assets and strengths within people, because if they're discouraged, it won't help to heap more discouragement on them. So when I say discouraged, one of the ways to understand that discouragement is to consider that we're all social beings who we need this sense of having belonging and having significance in our life. And when we feel those feelings of belonging and significance, the emotions we experience is we experience ourselves as empowered. That's power within. It's not power over people, and it's not power under people. It's that sense of power within, where you have a voice, where you can influence, where you know you can make your mark on the world. It's also feeling lovable. And lovable is different than feeling loved. I think feeling loved could be added in here very legitimately, but he was saying something different in this one. He's saying the feeling we get when somebody receives us, the feeling we get when somebody sees the way our mind works and sees the way our emotions are happening and finds that fascinating and delightful. So it's more of a receptivity. Instead of lavishing love on people, they might just need to be seen and heard. It also is a feeling of needing to be connected. So if you think of some of the biggest misbehavior, like school shootings, most of the time they can trace back that those kids that did those shootings felt isolated and felt disconnected from the larger community of their peers. And so that has a very detrimental effect. And also, this one and lovable, I think, are often neglected and overlooked more than the other two, and that is to give people more opportunities to contribute. Sometimes that misbehaving person needs to be asked more of, rather than, taking more away from them or thinking that they need a break. They might need to do more contributing and to be seen and heard. So think about if there's a person that's in a gang, and maybe that person has been told that in order to stay in this gang, they have to go out and shoot somebody to be initiated. If the only place that they feel empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing is in that gang, they will override their conscience and their fear of imprisonment. That's how powerful these needs are. And so I want to tell you this, that in the prison system, for example, we have what's called recidivism rate, which is re-incarceration rate. And so these are people who not only got in trouble in a really big way, but they were caught a second time and imprisoned. And that rate, oddly, is similar to our disengagement rates that I gave you. I said that was 71%. Well, recidivism is around 60 to 70% in all prisons nationwide. Where Adlerian psychology was used in a prison in Florida, that recidivism rate dropped to 4%. And I will tell you that in the client sites where we have done this Adlerian work, we have seen a similar dramatic change in misbehavior and disengagement. What we do to each other and to ourselves is we put people into what we call the monster box. The monster box is, oh, I would never go kill somebody, so you're a monster and I'm not a monster. You're a bad person and I'm okay. We do this with people who are misbehaving, and it's very harmful to them and us. So we have a saying at Lifework Systems, take people out of the monster box. So what they did in this prison was say to the inmates, we're no different. You're not a monster. You're not any worse or better than me, except for you believe from your economic background, your experiences, etc., that you only had a limited amount of ways to get these 4 core needs met. Since we're all more alike than different, let's work on a different way for you to get those met. So I just want you to know the handout that goes with this program covers some very reflective questions about this, but we're going to actually ask you a couple right now. What's one thing you can add at work or in your home to improve or increase these core needs? What's one thing you can subtract in order to improve and increase these core needs? And just to give you a quick example, in our family, we subtracted punishment and put redirect in, and that would be an example of an answer. So just keep that in mind. Keep that question in your mind throughout the day and the weeks to come. How could I increase these, and how could I take the negative things out of the environment that hurt this? So thanks for playing along with us. The definition and types of misbehavior is what we're going to cover next. So I want you to just accept this working definition for the purposes of the rest of this webinar. Misbehavior is any behavior that's not in alignment with the needs of a situation. So this is another question, and I'm just going to make it rhetorical. What important questions should you ask? So I want you to kind of look at this definition and think in your mind, gosh, what questions would I ask if this is truly the definition? Any behavior that's not in alignment with the needs of a situation. So one of the questions would be, what are the needs? Because sometimes we think we know what are the needs, but we're not considering what are the needs for everyone. And whose needs? Like when I was a little girl, my dad would come in and just flip the channel and put the news on and shush us out of the room. I don't know that he was thinking about everybody's needs, and that was very common in the 60s and 70s. But I just want you to know that misbehavior is where we're not having that mutuality of respect and consideration. Active destructive misbehavior is the most obvious form of misbehavior that we all can recognize. It's when somebody does something that's destructive to property, people, routines, relationships, and it's done very openly and aggressively and overtly. So this is a good example. Somebody looks like he's yelling at somebody. What does that cost? That's part of this is what is very obvious in the actively disengaged group that costs you $16,000 per person. Now, this is a picture of a mom dressing a kid that looks maybe 4 years old, maybe 5 years old. So active constructive misbehavior is a behavior that appears positive, correct, or constructive and is presented actively. Who's misbehaving in this picture, and how do you know? In this picture, we're saying the mother is the misbehaving person because that child is old enough to dress themselves. And so what about a child's need to feel empowered, a child's need to feel contributing? And we do this all the time in the workplace too. We do it by enabling people, by doing things or saying things to them that they already know or that they're already capable of understanding or are completing. And so we rob them of those opportunities to contribute and feel empowered. So consider those, because we're not aware of those instances where we enable. Another example that you might see is, say there's somebody that's being asked a question in a conference meeting. And every time somebody's asked a question, somebody else goes, oh, I got the answer to that. Oh, I got the answer to that. And they're kind of annoying everybody, but you can't really in your head think of that as misbehavior, but it actually is, because it's not allowing those around this person to contribute or to have a voice or to feel empowered. So active constructive is just a little more difficult sometimes to recognize. Passive destructive misbehavior is any behavior in which a person doesn't meet the needs of a situation, and that lack of behavior is actually destructive. And so this is a picture that was part of that disengaged 55% group, because this looks like a couple guys that are just daydreaming and shooting the breeze. Maybe they're going to pick up their phone and text a little or surf the internet. But it can also be other forms that are different than this, like somebody that just doesn't pay the electric bill and now they don't have electricity. So their lack of is the part that causes problems. So you want to consider, what does this cost us? Passive constructive is another one of those constructive ones that are hard to pinpoint. So it's when a person uses a form of inactivity and omission in a way that it looks like they're intending to be constructive or cooperative. So this picture is to remind me to give you this example. Let's say there's a brother and sister, and the mom says, look, by 4 o'clock, I want you both to go in there and clean that toy room up. And an hour later, the mom passes the toy room and sees the little girl, and they're putting everything all away. And she says to her, where's your brother? Why isn't he in here helping? And the little girl goes, I don't know. And she might be considered the good child, and that brother might be considered the bad child. Because that's what we do. We try to see who's at fault here when they're both actually in the dynamic. But the passive constructive part is the part that the daughter's playing in this example, because she's acting like she's intending to be cooperative and constructive, but she has failed to create the teamwork that was asked of both of them. So again, you can kind of see how people do these undercutting behaviors even in the workplace. If you happen to go through our entire program, we give you corporate, education, and family examples of all of these negative behaviors. So what are the helpful and non-helpful responses to these misbehaviors that we've seen? The first thing to really understand is that you need to understand what is underneath misbehavior so that you can be more effective and resolving it. So Adler said, not only are we social, but we're self-determining. We are always creating our reality. So what does that mean? That means that we have a lot of stuff underneath the visible behavior that we're doing to kind of create certain outcomes. So when a misbehaving person is misbehaving, like that guy that's in the gang, he's shooting people, right? All we can see is his behavior. We don't see that he's in that gang because he's trying to get his core needs met, unless we just take that as fact. We have to realize, wait a minute, this guy's behavior makes sense to him. And it makes sense to him because he's formed a certain set of values and beliefs that he's come up with on his own interpretation. And we're going to talk about this in the next slide. And then he is going to think and feel certain thoughts and feelings that will inform and reflect in his behavior. So a person that's a positive influence in the face of that has to be able to build that trust and rapport. So I gave the example of people that could sit down with an inmate and say, look, you're no different than I am. You're not in the monster box. They're building trust with that person that has done really awful behaviors. And sometimes it happens in the moment that you can build that trust. And absolutely, it happens every time you're redirecting. What you're doing is you're actually recognizing problems and faulty thoughts and feelings that come from fear and discouragement, and you're facilitating values and beliefs that come from fear and discouragement, all while at the same time satisfying the core needs. So you guys were asked in the beginning, what do we typically do when we're angry or we're feeling, hurt by somebody? We typically don't do this positive influence thing. So I just want you to be aware of, to be an influencer, you have to switch it up and kind of at least remember this is all there under the surface. So I just want to go on to another concept that Adler said. He said, not only are we self-determining and social, we're subjective. And this is so big because we all kind of believe we all think like each other, and we actually don't as much as we think. So this is where that iceberg model showed the value system and the belief system. And this is how we develop our belief system. We have all these events happen to us, and we make interpretations of what those events mean and what we think is actually going on. And then we create emotional and physical responses to what we're interpreting. And then we make actual decisions about it. And then we will start to form like generalized beliefs about life and men and women and work and power. This is the most tricky part. Once we form those beliefs, we actually will provoke life to prove that our belief system is accurate. So we'll actually start to influence the events in our lives to reinforce what we believe. So an example is the guy that was in the gang. Maybe he interprets that to be a man, you have to be violent. Maybe that's what he was programmed to. Maybe that's what he witnessed. Men have to be tough and be, aggressive to be a man. And maybe he has certain emotional and physical responses about that, and fears about, like, what are my options? I can't cry. I can't do a lot of things. And then he'll actually set up a dynamic in his life where he will cause events that keep reinforcing his violent belief system, until somebody comes along and breaks that belief cycle. This belief cycle is happening all the time in positive ways and in negative ways. If you're having a positive reaction to your interpretation, that's awesome. You wouldn't want to interrupt it. But when you're doing redirect, you're actually interrupting belief systems that are in play. And I know I'm using a very extreme example with that gang member, but I want you to know that in very small ways, we're interrupting cycles and feelings of fear and discouragement. While you don't have to be a psychotherapist to redirect negative behavior, you have to have more understanding than we typically do about behavior. So one of the crucial pieces is to understand that we're also very purposeful in every moment of our lives. What you put on your body to wear today, what kind of shoes you're wearing, your body language, everything is to accomplish things that you're mostly unconscious about. Why does this matter to misbehavior? It's because there are goals that happen around misbehavior. And so the reason that's important is that misbehavior is a little more complex than there's one cause and there's one solution. So the example I want to give to show you is, let's say this is a young man who's at work and he was asked to do a task. And his boss is now coming to him going, hey, you didn't do the task. What is your problem? And he's upset with him. And you can kind of see he looks like he's in trouble. Well, he might not have done that task because he has a pattern in his life that if he doesn't do certain things or he does certain things, he gets undue attention. You've probably seen kids that are constantly, come on, stop dawdling, pick up your book bag, get moving. There's a lot of times we're misbehaving unconsciously because we want that attention. It could be that we're in what's called the goal of power, and that we're going to be talking about that the rest of this webinar. But I remember I was dating a man one time and I said, hey, just out of curiosity, why aren't you wearing your safety belt? And his reaction was, I'm not letting the government control me. So sometimes a person may fail to do a task because they're in this, no, I won't, you can't make me mindset. It could be that this young man is in this state of mind where he's very prickly and he's very, just stay away from me kind of energy, just reject me kind of energy, because he's in some kind of a dynamic that causes this mistaken goal. And it's not power or attention. And sometimes the person isn't doing that task because he doesn't think he can. And he's so afraid that he's paralyzed and not taking responsibility for what's there to do. And sometimes it's a play on, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm okay, so I have to act puffed up like I'm more important. Oh, that assignment is too beneath me, or I didn't think I had to do that assignment, or I'm not going to be like everyone else. I have to be special. So can you see how the same presenting behavior could have 5 different goals behind it that you may not be aware of unless you understand that those 5 goals exist and you know how to identify them? So I want you to really rethink punishment, because I gave you that example of the guy in, the recidivism rate in prisons. I know that's a very extreme example, but it's very real. And it's also a macrocosm of a microcosm. So Adler said we're always trying to find these 4 core needs. He called them a felt plus. Because deep down inside, we're holistic. We want to be our whole selves. So when we keep these going and we're in relationships and conditions that create this, what happens is you have to ask yourself the question, does it ever make sense to really add further discouragement? So I just ask you guys to consider that. If it's true that we're holistic and we're creating all this stuff, trying to get to this good place, wouldn't it be helpful to put down further discouragement? So now we're going to go into what is redirect and what is one specific type of mistaken goal, and take that all the way through. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel like, well, now I kind of know what to do when this particular goal comes up. So what is redirect? Redirect is a technique to stop a cycle of limited thinking and behaving based in discouragement and fear. It's a method to diagnose and treat the causes of misbehavior. So the last slide just told you 5 possible different causes. It's a method for how to know which one is in play. And then it's a respectful and effective alternative to using what we typically use, which is the down and dirty, fast and often effective in the short run, but lots of bad effects in the long run, punishment or bribing or permissiveness. So just a quick on that technique to stop a cycle of limited thinking and behaving. First, that means you stop your own. I like to think of this as the example of a dog comes running up at you like it's going to bite you. You have to stop and relax and keep yourself from running because you're afraid because that dog's afraid. And it's difficult sometimes to stop that limited thinking and behaving because we're so influenced by the other person's discouragement and fear. So what you need for redirect is to learn to pay attention to what you're feeling first and foremost. It's slowing down. And by slowing down, I just mean a breath or 2, very, very quickly. We can check in and notice, what am I feeling? So the reason this is so difficult is most of us are so on autopilot that we don't practice emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness and social awareness first, and then we can have self-management and social and relationship management. So if we don't slow down, the feelings themselves are what help you know what mistaken goal the other person is in. So in this column that says mistaken goal, that's the misbehaving person's goal, whichever one they're in. When they're in a goal, there are certain feelings that go with that goal. So if somebody's in the power goal, you're going to be feeling a strong feeling of anger or provocation. It's not mild as it is in the one above. So it's kind of like, have you ever had that experience where you've got your blinker on, you're trying to pull into a parking spot, there's a car coming from the other side of the lane, and he sees you with your blinker on, but he whips into the space. Like the feeling most people feel is not mild. they might feel really provoked. And there's a lot of behaviors that might come out of that. So those behaviors that we do when we're in straight out reaction are called the sugar. And the reason they're called the sugar is because somebody else just demanded a reaction from us and we gave it to them without thought. It'd be like a little kid saying, I demand you give me a candy bar for dinner, and you just gave it to him without thought. Now I want another one for breakfast. Now I want to, it would be very permissive. The same is true when you're having a knee-jerk reaction to any of these mistaken goals. You are actually contributing to the fearful, discouraged belief system. So this is a phrase that I want you guys to know. When you redirect somebody, when you interrupt their subjective private logic, the very first thing they're going to do is they're going to get worse before they get better. And I just want you to know that that's really important to understand, because when they get worse, you might be tempted to think this redirect stuff doesn't work, but you are breaking something that has been formed over time. And that is something they're not going to give up until you show yourself as being a calm and strong influence in the face of what they're trying to get you to confirm in them. And you'll understand this hopefully more as we go through the power goal. So the mistaken goal of power is when a person is in this mindset of, I have to be the most powerful. In other words, I'm believing in win-lose. The true need deep down inside is, we all want win-win-win. And in the case of the power struggling person, they crave intense positive connection. That's why they're willing to engage in the obvious power plays, because they want intense positive connection, but they'll take the negative if they can't get it. The limiting beliefs are, I must defeat and get my way. Overpowering others is where I see and find my value and worth. I only count when I dominate, and might makes right. And so I just want you to consider that these beliefs that are limiting from the sense of who we truly are, but they're promoted and propagated everywhere. They're promoted in our sports, in our politics, even in our religions. If you look around, there's this whole win-lose dynamic constantly being supported. So when somebody is in this goal, they're either protesting, repelling, and defying, or they're on the other side of that. They're controlling and dominating. So the question we have for you is, are you dealing with anyone who's exhibiting either types of these power struggle behaviors? In the mistaken goal of power, when somebody's in that goal, you as the recipient feel angry and challenged and provoked. Misbehavior is never about you. So if somebody's doing something in a way that provokes anger in you, it just means they're in this discouraged state and using this particular goal. It feels very personal when somebody's misbehaving. It feels like it is about us. And it feels like we want to get real rational, like this is unreasonable. Why is this even happening? So you will feel provoked by this person. And your feelings will not be mild. Just like when I gave the example of somebody pulling into that parking spot, I would bet you most people would either internally maybe call them a cuss word or get mad about it, or even externally show it through a gesture or honking or yelling out the window or something like that. So when this goal is in play, you're not having mild feelings. You're having really strong feelings. Your thoughts are like, she can't get away with that. He can't get away with that. So the sugar, when this goal is in play, is to use your body language, your tone of voice, even your expression to express a state of win-lose aggressive behavior. So the sugar in the power goal is actually the struggle itself. We have some awesome videos of showing people bringing actual redirect challenges and seeing how they get pulled into the struggle, how the upping the ante happens. So I just want you to know that that is available. So when struggle is given, here's what happens. It gets worse. There are some mistaken goals where the behavior will not get worse. It'll stop temporarily. But in this goal, it gets worse. And the person gets more compelled to struggle. Both sides typically do. And let's say you're a parent or a boss and you can overpower your employee. The very fact that they got overpowered does not mean they felt they lost, because what they're trying to win is this idea that win-lose is the way to go. And even if you're the one that wins that day, what they've won is, oh, good, I can use my power that way too. And that's what they end up confirming over and over again in their life. This next video is a great example of what the redirect for the power goal looks like. So you're going to see 4 ways that I'm working with this person. And the fourth way is kind of a metaphor for what are the steps for the redirect. And then we'll go into actually showing those steps. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now.
So go ahead and take the other end of this dollar bill, because let's say you and I both really want this dollar bill. We both really need it. And we're fighting each other. We're both pulling against each other. What's going to happen to this dollar bill? It's going to rip. It's going to be a lose. It's going to be a lose-lose, right? Well, if you're determined not to let go, and we're really fighting over this, how are you feeling about you and
I? Just angry, I guess. Like,
right. Are you feeling good about us?
No.
No, it's like, oh, no, it's my dollar. Oh, it's my dollar. And all that. Like that's a lose-lose feeling, right? Now, if I got it, and I'm like, yes, I got it. Oh, good luck. Hope you find yours. How are you feeling about me right now?
Dang, I'm just like disappointed that I lost. And
right.
Just,
how do you feel about me, though? I'm like, well, I got it. Good luck.
I would think that you're a bad word.
Yeah. Right? Because it would feel like a lose-win. But in reality, can you see it's not really a lose-win. It's really a lose-lose because we're not going to be in good shape with each other, right? Okay, now let's say you're doing it again. And you really want it, and you're really pulling it, and so am I. And I go, fine, take it. I'm not going to fight over it. How are you feeling now? Okay, so tell me why you're feeling that way.
Guilty.
Yeah, it doesn't feel clean. It's like, yeah, I win, but it's not going to be good between us. You don't feel like it was done in a way that feels good to you.
Maybe you did need it more than I did.
Exactly. So now she second guesses herself, right? Okay, so now let's do it again. Okay, you really want it. Okay. You want it. You know what? So here's the thing. I know that you really want this dollar. Okay. And I believe that you have a legitimate reason for wanting this dollar. And the problem is that I want a dollar as well. So I don't know what to do. Do you have any ideas?
Sure.
Well, except for I need a whole dollar.
I mean, you're saying I'm confused.
Okay, so let me say it again. I know that you have a good reason for wanting this dollar. So, I mean, I don't want you to give that up. And I have a good reason for wanting this dollar. So, I just don't know what to do about it. What do you think we could do?
Try and work together to get more money.
Okay, so what did she just do? She moved,
option number 3.
She moved to cooperation, right? Like, and I didn't want her to sell out on her. So, now how does it feel that I'm this close to you?
Oh, weird, because I don't know you that
right.
But I did have you, so.
Right, I know. So she's actually more comfortable with intense closeness than most people. A lot of people are like, ooh, you can have the dollar because they don't even like the feeling of closeness. Even though you tell that there's no hostility in it, right? No. And there's no desire to try to, I'm even like, don't let go, I know you want this and need it.
So I'm going to go ahead and go into describing how is that last step redirect. So the steps for the power goal are, first of all, you have to recognize that you're feeling angry and provoked. If you don't even recognize that, there's no way you can manage yourself. And when you take that breath, if you know that, if you have that awareness, this is the power goal, you will stop yourself from engaging in a struggle. And then the second thing that's the hardest thing to do in all redirect is to think a positive intention that's the opposite of the fearful belief. So the fearful belief is, I have to believe in win-lose. The positive intention is, I don't believe in win-lose. This person has a good reason for things. This person has a valid viewpoint. I'm already reinforcing win-win by changing my mind about this person. The next step is that you say what you both want, but you always lead with what the other person says. So if you notice, I said, you really want this dollar, and I'm sure you have a good reason for wanting it. The problem is that I need a dollar too. What should we do? So what I did was I kept restating her wants first. And what you're really going for is the shift into cooperation. Now this person, the minute she was pulling me toward her, she actually went into cooperation when she hugged me, which is unusual. It didn't even up the ante, because in this situation, she wasn't even entering the win-lose dynamic. But that's what you're going for, is how do I get them from trying to fight with me to being in cooperation with me. So sometimes when you're in this power goal and you're redirecting it doesn't go as smooth as that one you just saw. The person gets worse before they get better sometimes. So I remember one time I was doing that exercise with a tall woman, And she said, I could take that dollar from you if I wanted to, like that. And I said, you could. I can't control you and I don't want to control you. You matter to me and I want us to be a good team. So we think that that's a position of weakness when somebody's in the power goal. It's actually the position of strength because you already know who you are, and it's not about you being a weak person. It's about you saying, yeah, I'm not going to do something that would overpower you. And so when you let them pull you into what matters to them, you are giving them an intense positive connection, which allows them to stop using a negative connection, intense connection with you. So I wanted to just go ahead and give you guys some time to ask a few questions, but I want to give you these quick takeaways. Remember, when you're facing anybody that's misbehaving in any way, whether it's power goal or not, this person is discouraged. They're not feeling empowered, lovable, connected, and contributing. Rather, they're in the inferiority complex. So the most important thing you can do is not join them in it. If you only do that, you've done no harm. You might have not been able to help them move out of their limiting belief completely, but you haven't made it worse and you haven't validated it. And hopefully you'll be able to really think about the power goal and the redirect of it so that you can even do more than no harm. And to do that, you just have to breathe and slow down. Remember, if discouragement is present, you want to encourage yourself and the other person, because that way you're working against kind of the energies that are in play. As much as you possibly can, start looking for practical, specific ways to actively support and promote the conditions and conversations that protect those 4 core needs. And that also means sometimes removing, like we talked about. As mushy as it sounds, work on, especially somebody with power goal, work on creating intense positive connections on purpose. I remember I taught this to a woman that had a teenager who was constantly breaking curfew. And I told her about how her daughter must really want intense positive connection. So the next day she called me and she goes, I can't believe what you said was true. I went home. My daughter said, what time do I have to come home tonight? And the mom said, you know what? I haven't told you how much you mean to me. I love you so much. And the daughter goes, Mom, quit being weird, which is a good example of upping the ante. And the mom walked over and just put her arms around her and said, no, really, you are so important to me. And the daughter's all stiff in her hug. And she goes, fine, I'll be home at 10:30. And she walked out and she came home on time. And the mother called to tell me, she's like, I can't believe that this abundant affection made such a difference. But it's true for especially the power goal. We're going to go to questions next, but I just want to let you know, if any of you are interested in taking the full version of this course, we have an online course. We have a sale of 25% off today. We have another course that also is 25% off, both very big programs. If you happen to be any of these titles down in the bottom, you can additionally get continuing education credits for each program. And then additionally, we'll throw in our phone app for each of the programs, which allows you to go back and access information at your fingertips after you've learned these skills. But right now, it looks like we have maybe 5 or 6 minutes if you guys have any specific questions on anything we've talked about or even anything we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I have some questions that I've been holding till the end here.
Okay.
In the beginning, someone asked, way back in the beginning, we talked about the cost of disengagement. I don't have that slide in front of me, but it's, she said 55% is very high. How can we change that to zero? I think zero disengagement. I think she meant, she says 0 engagement.
Like I said, the interesting thing is that our disengagement numbers are sort of parallel with our prison numbers. And I have seen the kind of reductions that are so dramatic in the prison system. I've seen them in the client sites where they create a certain kind of culture where people don't go into that inferiority complex. I'm talking about everything starts going away. The racism, the ageism, the intergenerational problems, I can't be myself problems. They just start to dissolve. I think we need to understand what causes the disengagement so that we can dismantle some of those systems and put systems in that build those 4 core needs. And that's exactly what I did from the early 80s with my family.
Somebody asked, what is the biggest difference between empowered and contributing?
Empowered is, I know that I can put my own clothes on, for example, with that little kid picture, or I know that I can go out and I can make a living, and I know that I can be a thriving member of a community, for example. Those are good examples of empowerment. Contributing is more like, bring me in to what is needed. The advice I would give you, something small they can bring or do. Like, hey, would you mind bringing a quote for our meeting, to open our meeting tonight. Hey, would you mind picking up so-and-so and bringing them to the meeting tonight? Hey, would you bring a bottle of Coke to the meeting tonight? Hey, will you share this information that is going to be relevant to our topic tonight? That's where we rob them of what would fulfill them. So empowered could be that you're using your power to contribute, but power could be, I'm going to stand up to somebody in a loving, caring way. It's not always that you're contributing something. It's just you might be standing for yourself, or you might living into your purpose from a place of empowerment. So there are some distinctions between those two.
Somebody asked regarding step 3 of the redirect. Say what you both want, lead with theirs first. Takes control away from them. How is this win-win-win? ?
Okay, first of all, you're not taking control away. So let's say I was talking to an employee and they're saying, no, I don't want to do something. I would say, oh, I can see where you don't want to do this, and I can understand how that could make sense to you. And I'm sure you have a really good reason for that, and I'd be even happy to hear it. The problem I'm having is that I know that these things have to get done for us to be able to be effective today, and I don't know what to do for us to be in cooperation. What do you think we should do? Now, a lot of times upping the ante looks like this. Well, I think you should just give me my way. And we're tempted to be pulled into the struggle because now they're just trying to provoke us. And so you stay with the program. You say, oh, so for you, it would really make sense if I would just give way right now, that you really feel like that makes more sense. I can understand how you feel that way. I've felt that way myself before, where I just wish somebody would give way. The problem I'm having is I know that if I give way on this, these things could happen. I don't want that to happen. So would you help me figure out a solution that we both feel good about? So you're not giving away power. You're just making them as important. Like Covey's, seek to understand and then be understood. You're doing that in the power redirect.
Best way to deal with passive destructive behavior.
Well, part of passive destructive is noticing that it's happening and not discounting your own noticing. Oh, okay. Oh, I see that person is passive destructive, and I notice I'm feeling provoked by it. If you're provoked by it, they're in the power goal. They're just doing passive power goal. Part of it is you can't say everything that looks like passive destructive is power goal, and that's why I really encourage you guys to take the full program. Remember I gave that example of the young employee not doing his task and how it could be 5 different reasons. On day 1, it could be he wanted goal of attention, and on another day, it could be he was in power goal. So you can never judge which misbehavior is in action by what's showing up on the surface. You can only go by what you're feeling inside. And I would say if somebody's in any form of misbehavior, having redirect is, to me, the ultimate answer, because I'm not going to use force. I'm not going to use punishment. I'm not going to use bribery. I'm not going to look away like it's not happening. I'm going to resolve it. And that's why it's so important to not fall back on the old standby of punishment and bribing. This is one of my favorite new quotes. It's not the feel-good kind of quote in one way, but it's really true. We have a problem, especially in our country right now, with change. We want to be blind to it. It's not that we don't know new things. You might have even heard we shouldn't punish or we shouldn't bribe or something like that. You might have already heard that or a lot of other things. But here's the deal. We have to go out of our way to learn something new. We have to go out of our way to dismantle something old. And often the real problem with change blindness is that we don't want to see that what we've been doing and what we've been thinking could be out of date. We think it indicts us that it could be out of date. We think it makes us guilty. We think it makes us irrelevant. It doesn't. It worked for when it was needed, and it's no longer helpful. So if we could get past these things that are in red, we could get past our change blindness, and we could create a much better world, a world in which everybody loves their lives. This is the email address to send to if you want anything that you see on this screen here or the specials that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, well, thank you to everyone who's joined us for today's webinar. Judy, thank you for sharing your insight and expertise. We all appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And again, I encourage all of our listeners and participants to take advantage of the online training workshops, which include both the phone app and the audio version. And if you're looking in healthcare for the continuing education credits, that's really important. Remember, you will receive a separate email with the opportunities available through Lifework Systems. We also have another webinar scheduled December 5th at noon called Creating an Exceptional Culture. If you have any additional questions or would like to connect directly with Judy or Lifework Systems team, you can either reach out directly using the contact information on the slide, or you can reach out via Twitter or LinkedIn. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.